Hi, my name is Corey, and I'm a CG specialist here at Chaos Group. Today, I'm incredibly excited to share with you our latest render engine, VRay 5 for Rhino. With VRay 5 for Rhino, you'll be able to work faster, get beautiful looking images with less effort, enhance your materials and textures with greater realism, and go further than ever in post-production, all using the powerful new features in VRay 5. We'll start by exploring real-time rendering with the new VRay Vision viewer. VRay Vision is a real-time rasterizer, meaning it functions like a game engine under the hood, making it possible to get real-time feedback as you work in your scenes, and even save images or animations. We'll then take a look at the improved sky in VRay 5 and use it with the new Light Gen tool to automatically generate lighting scenarios for the scene. I'll also demonstrate using the Light Gen with VRay 5's custom HDR images that give you stunning-looking skies without any additional effort. We'll also take a look at shader updates that simplify your workflow while offering even more realistic results. Lastly, we'll explore light mixing and compositing, which enable you to create drastic changes to your image's lighting even after rendering. Let's go ahead and jump into a scene I've prepared here in advance to showcase these new features. First, let's take a look at the new VRay Vision viewer in Rhino. VRay Vision is a lightweight real-time viewer that is smoothly integrated right into VRay 5. It functions like a game engine under the hood, using 3D rasterization to get you lightning-fast scene previews without ever having to leave the VRay ecosystem. Now you can adjust your lights, navigate around, and shade your scenes with real-time feedback, making it easier than ever to set up your scenes quickly. And you can even export images and animations using VRay Vision. To get started, we can simply click on the VRay Vision icon up here in the Tools panel to open up the Vision viewer. You'll see that it opens in a separate window, which you can position on your screen wherever you would like. Let's go over the controls up top here first. At the top left, we have the Live Link icon, which indicates if the Live Link with VRay is currently active, and opens up the Live Link panel where some live session options can be changed. When Live Link is enabled, it means that any changes you make in your Rhino scene will be automatically updated and displayed in the Vision viewer. Next, we have a folder icon for loading in a VR scene file into the viewer. Then, we have the info icon, which displays helpful shortcuts. After that, we have the resolution modes, which we can toggle between fit and window to match the window size and aspect ratio, or match scene aspect, which matches the aspect ratio from the VRay render settings, though the size of the image is still determined by the window size. Next, we have the camera navigation mode. This lets us use the tab key to toggle between orbit mode and fly mode, which enables me to fly around the scene like in a game engine using the WASDQE keys and left-clicking and dragging to look around. You can hold down Shift to temporarily increase the movement speed as well. Next, we have the option to enable or disable auto exposure. We also have a settings panel, which allows us to tweak various controls from auto exposure to movement speed and sensitivity. You can check out our docs page for more detailed information about these settings. Next, we have the color corrections panel. Here we'll have access to the type of tone mapping applied to the image, as well as color correction controls such as exposure, contrast, and so forth. Finally, we have the save options, which let us manage everything from the image file format to the output resolution to exporting animations and so forth. Alright, let's take a quick look at navigating with Vision. If I click and drag while moving the mouse around, you can see that I'm able to orbit and rotate my perspective. Meanwhile, clicking the middle mouse button and dragging lets me move my position, and right-clicking and dragging lets me zoom in and out. Okay, I've now arranged the Vision viewer and Rhino side by side, so let's see how we can work in Rhino's viewport and get real-time feedback in the viewer using VRay Vision's Live Link to Rhino. For example, I'll import some geometry into the scene, and you'll see that it updates in Vision right away. We can reposition this tree, or even create a duplicate of it and rotate its position, all while getting fully lit and shaded feedback in the Vision viewer. Great! Now I'm going to unhide a few layers of additional geometry to work with. Next, let's try applying a material to this car from the VRay Asset Editor. I'll give it this car paint material that I've set up in advance. And just like that, we've gotten an immediate update showing the car with its new material. Now that you've seen how we can get real-time feedback as we work using VRay Vision's Live Link, let's unhide some additional geometry in the scene before we work on the lighting. For example, I'll unhide these houses here, and you'll see that if we switch back to Vision, they show up right away. I'll continue to unhide the rest of the geometry I've prepared here in advance, such as trees, rocks, and some background structures, and you'll see how they quickly appear in Vision. Alright, now let's take a look at adjusting the lighting here. You'll see that we can easily tweak the sunlight's direction by holding Shift and using the left mouse button to control its altitude when going up and down, and to control the azimuth when going left and right. The sunlight adjusts right away, allowing us to find an ideal position. You can even hold Shift and drag the right mouse button to adjust the sun's intensity up and down. Also, at any time, you can press F5 to reset the sun position and the lighting changes, so as to match the original scene state. This is because VRay Vision is a viewer, so any changes you make in Vision will not affect the Rhino scene. Okay, let's disable the sun for a moment, and instead enable a dome light I have set up in advance. With VRay Vision, we can work with dome lights as well, giving you different options for lighting your scenes in real time. In the right-hand flyout menu, we can also easily adjust the dome light's horizontal rotation parameter. And you'll see that the change updates in Vision immediately, making it easier than ever to make artistic decisions about lighting a scene, since we get a preview right away. Also, note that when you have the automatic IBL sun option enabled in the Vision settings, Vision will automatically add a directional light based on the brightest spot in an HDR image you're using to help you get a more accurate lighting preview. However, this option has no effect if the project sun is enabled, and it is not recommended if there is no single distinct bright spot in the HDRI used for lighting. Alright, let's now make some tweaks to the additional artificial lights in the scene, such as changing the house lights to a warmer orange color. And let's also increase their intensity a bit. There we go, that's working for me. Now you can see how Vision is able to support various lighting scenarios, ranging from bright and sunny days to dome lights with sunset skies, as well as handling artificial lights in the scene. At this stage, let's take a look at how we can export a camera animation using VRay Vision. Back in Rhino, we'll first need to enable the animation toggle in the Asset Editor settings. I have already set up a straightforward camera animation, so now all we have to do is go back to Vision and press the play button to see a preview of it. I think that looks pretty good, so let's do an export of it. I'll click on the save icon, and since I've already specified the file output path, the image format, and FPS, all I have to do is enable the Export Animation checkbox and press Export. And with that, we'll get a preview as it renders out the animation sequence. Alright, now you've seen an overview of the incredible speed you can get working with VRay Vision, and how it can improve your workflow as you get real-time feedback while working on your scenes. Also, note that at any time, you can select the VRay 5 render engine of your choice and render out a high-quality ray-traced image or animation. This means you get both the speed advantages of real-time feedback as well as the benefits of rendering a fully ray-traced production image. Okay, let's move forward now and explore some of the other new features available in VRay 5. Okay, let's now take a look at the new VRay frame buffer in VRay 5. I've got the VFB open here with an image from one of the scenes we'll be exploring a bit further later on. The new VRay frame buffer has been redesigned to not only enhance your render experience, but also offer powerful new functionality that lets you go beyond rendering. To start, let's take a look at these icons at the top right here, which serve as our main render controls. These icons are essentially the same render controls from VRay Next, but redesigned. They allow you to do things like save your image out of the VFB, draw out a render region, start an interactive render so you can get interactive feedback when working in your scene, as well as start a production render, and so forth. On the top left here, we have a few drop-down menus, such as the File menu for saving and loading images, menus for accessing render controls, a View menu for setting options like the display color space, and lastly, the VFB settings, which I'll cover in a moment. If we head down here and double-click on this handle, we will open up the History panel. Here we can store a history of rendered images with their post-production corrections, and do A/B comparisons between images. However, to use it, we'll first need to enable the history in the VFB settings. Simply head over to the History tab, check on Enabled, and then specify a history folder path to save your history images to. You can use your project folder or add a custom path to a different folder as well. I'll just paste a folder path I copied in advance here, and always make sure to click Save and Close to save any changes. Now, the icons at the top of the History tab become available to use. I'm going to click on the green plus icon here, which will save the image I have rendered currently to the VFB history. Next, let's click the A/B icon here, which you'll see enables us to do an A/B comparison between images, or compare up to 4 images simultaneously. We can also use these icons to load in an image or delete an image from the VFB history. You'll see as I hover over the images that I'm given some information about them as well, such as their resolution and render times. And if I right-click on an image here, I can add a note to the saved render, as well as choose from options such as loading in post-processing layers from a saved image. Also, note that at the bottom of the VFB, the toolbar gives us pixel value and coordinate information based on where our mouse is hovering over the image. Okay, let's now head over to the right side of the VFB and click on the handle here to open up this tab. Over here, we have the new Layer Panel editor available in VRay 5. Here we have the ability to manage all of our post effects right inside of the VFB, leveraging the power of a layer tree-based editor for doing color corrections, as well as light mixing and compositing, which we'll cover later on. For a quick overview of the layer editor, you'll see that these color correction layers correspond to the image that I have already loaded in here. To add a new layer for color corrections, we can simply click on the green plus icon or Create Layer button, and then select from the suite of color corrections and tools for adjusting the image. For example, let's click on the filmic tone map, which contains different types of mapping curves and gamma corrections for affecting the image. You'll see that it has been added to the top of our layer tree. We'll work with the layer editor in more detail later on when we're doing compositing, but for a basic understanding, you'll see that each layer has properties below, which we can adjust to fine-tune the look of our image. For example, I can lower the opacity of the filmic tone map correction we added to tweak its visibility. The filmic tone map also has different preset types, which each affect the image by altering the overall light and dynamic range. There are also some further parameters below for some preset types to customize the tone mapping. These controls allow you to adjust the dark spots, highlights, and midtones for the image, which you can experiment with to find a look that suits your preference. Alright, now that you've seen how to tweak the properties for this particular layer, let's head back up to the top to mention the other icons available here. You'll see that we can also delete the selected layer, and we have options for saving and loading in layer tree presets. We'll cover how to use presets later on. Lastly, we have the Stats tab, which gives us helpful information about the scene and our devices, such as performance and memory tracking data, which depend on the scene and the rendering mode. Alright, now that you've seen an overview of the new VRay frame buffer in VRay 5, let's move on to take a look at some exciting new tools for lighting that can speed up your workflow and give you stunning looking images. In VRay 5, we've introduced several new lighting tools to enhance your workflow. Let's first take a look at some improvements we've made for working with the VRay Sun and Sky system. We have implemented a new custom sun orientation parameter in Rhino, which offers a straightforward widget to easily orient the sun in the scene. Now, directly inside the asset editor, you'll have control over the sun's azimuth and altitude, or horizontal and vertical angles. To get a sense of our scene at the moment, let's first start an interactive render. You'll see that we have an exterior scene here using the VRay Sun and Sky system. Let's see how we can use the new custom sun orientation controls to quickly make some changes to our scene's lighting. Back in the asset editor, I'll open up the right-hand flyout panel, and you'll see here that we can toggle on the custom orientation. Now you can see in the VFB that we're getting a different sun angle. Let's see how we can use the custom orientation parameters to make further tweaks to the sun's position. For example, each icon here corresponds to either the vertical angle or the horizontal angle respectively. Let's tweak the horizontal angle first, which you'll see updates in the swatch preview as well, giving us some helpful interactive feedback. Great! Let's try making a few more changes just to see how some different sun positions affect the lighting for the scene. We can also type in manually the exact horizontal angle and vertical angle that we need. Alright, now you can see how easy it is to use the new orientation controls and experiment with different sun angles for your scene. Now let's take a look at the new improved sun and sky. So far, we have been using the VRay Sky procedural texture with the HOSEC method. In VRay 5, we've introduced the improved sky model, which is an analytical sky model that offers striking sunrises and sunsets, which can be ideal for when you do not want the sun to be positioned completely above the horizon. Simply scroll down to the sky settings in the asset editor and click the sky model dropdown. Here, we can switch our sky model to improved, which also updates in the preview swatch right away. Back in the VFB, you'll see that the improved sky makes a big difference for our sunset here. There is a vibrant spectrum of colors, which is quite striking and helps to give our scene an exciting new mood. You can even tweak the position and size multiplier for the sun, and the sun will adjust its colors dynamically. For example, to show a large dark red sunset, giving you a wide variety of diverse lighting scenarios to play with. Alright, let's explore the new Light Gen tool in VRay 5, which lets you automatically generate lighting scenarios to choose from, with just a few clicks. Using either the VRay Sun and Sky system or HDR images, you can easily illuminate exteriors or interiors with natural light. The resulting scenarios are then presented to you as thumbnails, which offer up to hundreds of lighting variations you can apply to your scenes without any manual work required. To demonstrate how it works, let's open up the right-hand flyout menu so that we can see the custom orientation parameters, and then head up to the toolbar to click on the Light Gen icon. You'll see that the Light Gen menu appears and asks us to choose between generating lighting scenarios for an interior or an exterior scene. The interior mode uses natural sunlight from the VRay Sun and Sky, and performs a pre-pass analysis stage before generating, which accounts for openings such as windows and doorways. Rather than generating completely random sun angles, it determines which light angles might be the most interesting for the sunlight to come in through. For the exterior mode, you'll see that we can also use HDR images to generate lighting scenarios. We have heavily modified these HDRIs to improve their results, removing the ground from the images, and matching the VRay physical sun and sky intensities as much as possible. This means that you'll get fairly accurate exposure and light levels when using the Light Gen. Since this is an exterior scene here, let's stick with the exterior mode, and take a look at the sun and sky parameters below. You'll see that we get some straightforward controls for the number of variations we want to generate for the sun's altitude and azimuth. I'm going to increase these to 5 and 10, which you'll see below means that we will generate 50 variants. Note that we can also change the size of the thumbnails that are generated as well, with a smaller thumbnail size making results easier to calculate. Okay, let's go ahead and press the Generate button and see what we get. You'll see right away that it begins calculating and generating various thumbnail previews for us with different lighting conditions. We're now going to have 50 different lighting scenarios to choose from with just the click of a button. Since you've seen how this process works now, let's press the Stop button and then load in some thumbnails I've generated in advance. Note that when a generation process completes, you can press Save to save the thumbnail set as a .lightset file, which we can then load in at another time to access these same thumbnails later. Now, let's press Reset and click the Load button so I can load in a set of previously generated thumbnails. Okay, now you'll see that I have loaded in a bunch of lighting scenarios to choose from, all generated with the VRay Sun and Sky system. To select a lighting scenario, simply click on a thumbnail. Then, you'll see on the right that the sunlight's custom orientation parameters update to match the thumbnail settings. Now, let's start an interactive render to see how the new lighting scenario looks. Alright, now we've got a nice looking evening sky thanks to the new improved sky model, with some warm sunset colors shining onto the buildings. Let's stop the interactive render now and prepare to generate another set of thumbnails. I'll click on the Reset button here at the bottom of the LightGen UI, and then I'm going to switch the light source over to the HDR mode. You'll see that the controls are very similar to the sun and sky mode. I can set the number of HDR image styles to use and the number of variations or rotations to generate per HDR image. I'll set these to 10 and 18 respectively, and you'll see that this will give us 180 variants to choose from. Note that we can also set a seed, which affects the random variation of each HDR. Now once again, we can simply press Generate and watch as the different lighting scenarios are automatically generated for us with HDR images. Note that when using the HDR option, it will add a dome light asset named LightGen Dome, which you can select and then further tweak in the VRay Asset Editor. We can also easily swap in and out HDRIs manually by simply selecting the dome light and loading in a different HDR file in the bitmap settings. Okay, let's once again press the Stop button. I'm then going to press Reset and load in a .lightset file containing some HDR thumbnails I generated in advance. Now, we have a ton of HDR image thumbnails to choose from. Before we take a closer look, let's first head to the Settings tab and take a look down in the camera settings at the exposure value parameter. This parameter controls the sensitivity of the camera to the scene lighting levels. You'll see now that as I click on an HDRI thumbnail in the LightGen, the exposure value setting automatically updates to the appropriate new value that is stored with the thumbnail in order to correctly expose the image for rendering. Let's go ahead and start an interactive render now to take a look at the result. There we go. You'll see right away that we're getting a nice looking cloudy sunset, all thanks to the LightGen's HDR image mode. And we have not only just one HDR lit image here, but we've also got a bunch more that we can choose from if this one doesn't suit our needs. For example, let's scroll down on our list of generated thumbnails and find an image with a different mood. Let's try this one out. Now, you'll see that the interactive render begins to update right away, giving us a nice bright blue sky with some fluffy clouds. Note that the exposure value has adjusted automatically too, so that we're getting a nice looking image without any additional manual steps required. Okay, let's take a look at one more lighting scenario that offers us a mood that we haven't really seen yet. There we go. Now you can see just what a dramatic difference you can get in your scene's lighting simply from choosing different LightGen scenarios and pressing Render. The variety of possibilities you can achieve with the LightGen are incredibly versatile, and what's more, you can even enhance them further with artificial lights, or tweak the lighting results to customize them to your satisfaction. Overall, the VRay LightGen makes it easy to generate up to hundreds of impressive lighting scenarios, so that you can focus on the artistic aspects of creating beautiful looking images. In VRay 5, we've implemented a new coat layer for the VRay generic material, which makes it easy to add a shiny polished character to create materials such as metallic paint, carbon with coating, certain types of plastics, varnished wood, and more. This can significantly speed up your shading workflow, and in addition, get you even faster render results using the coat parameters than with traditional workflows such as using a blend material. To demonstrate, let's make sure this coat car window material is selected in the asset editor. Then, let's start an interactive render to see how this material looks at the moment. Okay, you can see that we've got a black-looking windshield, but it doesn't really have that shiny glare that you'd expect from a window. Let's head to the new coat layer dropdown and take a look at its parameters for controlling its appearance. The coat amount specifies the blending weight of the coat layer. A value of 0 does not add a coat layer, while higher values blend the coat gradually. The coat color determines the coat layer's color, which I've set to a light blue. The coat glossiness controls the sharpness of reflections, with a value of 1 being perfect glass-like reflection. We also have the coat IOR, which specifies the index of refraction, or how much the light is bent as it enters the coat. To enable the coat, simply slide the coat amount from 0 to 1. You'll see right away that the swatch preview updates as well, giving us an idea of how the material will look on the windshield. And now you'll see in the VFB that we're getting some nice looking reflections in the coat layer. Thanks to these simple yet powerful controls, you can see just how easy it is to add a coat layer without any need to set up complex blend materials. I'm liking how this looks already, so let's move on to take a look at another new material layer, the sheen layer. In VRay 5, we've added a new sheen layer to the VRay generic material, which makes it possible to easily create fabric materials with a realistic, cloth-like appearance. The sheen parameters act as a top reflective layer on the diffuse color, resulting in a fall-off effect for cloth with straightforward controls that enables us to create materials such as satin or velvet. To start, let's first take a look at this sheen cloth material that does not have a sheen layer enabled yet, but is applied to some cloth geometry on a chair in our scene. You'll see as the image clears up that the cloth looks okay, but it is missing the fall-off effect that is characteristic of a textile material. Back in the asset editor, let's open up the right-hand flyout menu to take a look at the sheen's parameters. You'll notice that the sheen drop-down menu is not immediately visible, and that is because we'll need to toggle on the advanced settings with this icon here. Now we'll see the drop-down menu appear, so let's take a look at its parameters. The sheen has two straightforward controls built in, enabling you to alter the sheen's color, with black disabling the sheen effect altogether. Meanwhile, the sheen glossiness controls the sharpness of the reflections. A value all the way at 1 means all of the light reaches the diffuse color, therefore diminishing the sheen's visibility. When the sheen glossiness value is lower, the sheen effect appears more pronounced. In order to get a more realistic looking sheen color, we can click and drag to copy the existing diffuse color from the swatch above, and paste that into the sheen color texture slot. Now, I'll simply increase the slider to make it brighter. Next, I'll lower the sheen glossiness down a bit to reflect more light. And you'll see that as I go lower, the sheen effect is becoming more visible in the swatch preview above. I think that looks promising, so let's see how the material looks on the cloth in our scene. Alright, now that's looking much better. We're getting a nice sheen effect, which feels natural since we copied the fabric's diffuse color as a reference for the sheen color. Now our fabric appears much more like cloth, with a gentle fall-off effect. Let's now take a look at the new randomization parameters we've introduced in VRay 5, which make creating realistic-looking materials easier than ever. To start, you'll see that we've got a decent-looking floor here, but it's a bit too monotone-looking for my taste. Let's explore how we can use the new set of randomization parameters for the multi-sub texture to easily create color variations for the floor here. The new parameters help to speed up your workflow, while also keeping the number of textures used low. To demonstrate, let's make sure the floor material is selected in the asset editor, and then open up the right-hand flyout menu. Since we're adding randomization to the floor's diffuse color, let's right-click the diffuse texture swatch and head to the wrap-in menu. Here we can select the multi-sub texture, which will place our diffuse color's texture inside of the multi-sub, so we can make further tweaks to the diffuse. The VRay multi-sub texture distributes multiple textures to many objects via one single material, based on specified IDs or a random distribution. To set it up, we need to set the getID_from mode to establish what ID to use to feed the multi-sub texture data to the material. As you can see, we have a bunch of options, ranging from useFaceMaterialID, where VRay considers the face IDs when feeding the color or texture data to the materials, as well as object IDs, to several random by modes for assigning random colors based on an ID type. I'll select Random by Object ID, which assigns random colors based on the object's ID. Now we'll see the new randomization parameters exposed, with each of their input values representing a percentage of the hue, saturation, or gamma range. There is also a seed for changing the randomization pattern below. Let's try increasing the hue just a bit to see how that affects our image. As a general note, you usually won't need to set these values very high, or they can start to overpower the image, so I'll increase these gently. You'll see that the hue variation is kicked in, but since we set it fairly low, the effect is pretty subtle. Let's see what happens if we increase the saturation parameter next. Now we're getting a bit more variation in the saturation across the floor tiles. Finally, let's increase the gamma variation to see how that impacts the floor. Alright, now you can see that tweaking the gamma has made a huge difference in how our floor tiles look. However, this parameter is fairly sensitive, and I think the result is a bit too drastic, so let's bring the gamma back a bit. There we go, that's looking much better. Now we're getting some nice variation between the tiles to help break up the monotony and repetition of the floor's original color. With just a few small tweaks to the hue, saturation, and gamma variation parameters, we've created a more dynamic and non-uniform looking floor without any need for complex shader setups. Now you can see how the multi-subtexture's powerful randomization controls make it easier than ever to make your textures more interesting, less repetitive, and more realistic as a result. Next, let's explore another method for adding randomization to textures, this time using the new UVW Placement texture. Let's start an interactive render just to see how things are looking so far. You'll see here that I've got a leather material with an additional texture to help give it some interesting variation. That looks alright, but you can see that the texture has a repetitive tiling pattern visible. Let's see how we can use the new UVW Placement texture in VRay 5 to randomize this pattern and hope to make the leather look even more realistic. In the asset editor, let's click on the bitmap texture that is loaded into the diffuse color for the leather's generic VRay material. It's wrapped in some color corrections, so let's click on the color input. Now we can see the pattern in the swatch preview above, which helps to give us a sense of how it will appear in the render as we apply some randomization. Let's head down to the Texture Placement menu and take a look at its parameters. In VRay 5, we can now switch the type to the new Mapping Source option, which will let us use an external UV placement source for the texture placement. Simply click on the texture swatch to add the new UVW Placement texture to it. The VRay UVW Placement texture operates as a custom mapping source that can be shared between different textures. It is equipped with randomization parameters that allow randomizing the texture placement based on different IDs, names, and so forth, as well as contains additional controls for the amount and method of randomization. You'll find these parameters in the randomization dropdown, where you'll see that we have a bunch of options to choose from. For this scene, let's enable the new stochastic tiling method, which changes the mapping based on the UV tile, and can be especially helpful for patterns that have repetition. You can also play with the various offset parameters below, or use the UV rotation parameter to restrict the angle of the rotation of the stochastic tiling, and create a variety of blending results to suit your needs. I'll leave the other tiling values at their defaults, and let's take a look at the results. Alright, now you can see how just by adding the UVW Placement texture and enabling the stochastic tiling option, the repetitive pattern from our original texture is no longer visible. Note that you can also use the Tile Blend slider beneath the stochastic tiling to control the amount of edge blending between adjacent tiles. That said, just simply enabling the stochastic tiling has already given us a much more authentic looking result without any need to overlay multiple textures or spend time tweaking parameters. Okay, let's now take a look at the new contour controls, which can be used to create stylized images or make renders look like scale models. In previous versions of VRay, you would typically need to create contours using a time-consuming shader setup with the VRay Toon material. Now in VRay 5, you can simply add or remove contours as an attribute to any shader, without any need for reassigning materials. In addition, contours can also be assigned and controlled globally, so that you can easily apply contours to your entire scene. To demonstrate, let's select the material I have set up here to override the car paint with contours, and then open up the right-hand flyout menu. To add contours, we can simply click the Add Attribute icon here, and then select the Contour option. You'll see that this adds the Contours menu drop-down below, and the swatch preview updates above with black outlines. Let's take a look at how this appears in the interactive render. You'll see that the contour lines have appeared on part of the flying car here. Let's make some tweaks with the contour parameters to see how we can stylize the image even further. In the Contours dropdown, you'll see that we have several parameters we can tweak to create a look that suits our needs. For example, let's try changing the line color to something that stands out more, like a bright red. There we go. Now the contour lines are much more visible in the interactive render. You can also feel free to play with the additional parameters in the contour settings. For example, you could adjust the width to make the lines appear thicker, or tweak separate controls to alter the color and width of inner lines. However, the contours are only applied to the material on the flying car here. What if we want to apply contours to an entire scene? In this case, we can switch to using the global contour controls instead. In the Settings panel of the Asset Editor, there is a Global Contour Controls toggle in the right-hand flyout menu. When I enable it, you'll see that we're now getting contour lines applied to the entire scene, rather than just for the flying car material. In addition, the red color that we specified for the car is still displayed, allowing me to apply specific contour attributes to certain materials, along with global contour settings for the rest of the materials in the scene. Alright, now you've seen how with the new controls, applying contours to your entire scene is as easy as clicking on a toggle. In addition, you can easily add contours to existing materials and tweak their appearance using an assortment of intuitive parameters without any need to spend time reassigning shaders. Alright, let's go ahead and dive into post-production in VRay 5 and explore how we can do light mixing and compositing to further improve our renders. I've opened up the scene I'll be using for a production render here. First, let's explore a crucial setup step before we can do light mixing in VRay 5. For a quick background, when a light mix render element is added before rendering, the intensity and color of the lights and light-emitting materials can be changed directly from the VFB, both during and after rendering. This enables you to easily experiment with a wide variety of moods and lighting styles in one convenient location, without having to navigate to individual light parameters or needing to re-render your image. To set up your scene for light mixing, head to the Render Elements dropdown in the Asset Editor and add the Light Mix render element. Then, in the right-hand flyout menu, just make sure you've set the Group By parameter to the mode of your choice in order to specify how to group the lighting information. In this case, I'll group the lights by layers so that the lighting information for each layer is stored in a separate channel. Now that I've added the Light Mix render element, I could also add any other render elements I normally work with from here, and then when ready, do a production render. Alright, once the render is complete, we are ready to do some light mixing. To get started, you'll see that in the Layer Editor, I have selected the source layer, and then in the properties down below, I have already switched over to the light mix mode. As a result, you'll see below that we have a bunch of different light channels here that represent all of the layers of lights that I had in the scene, since I set the mode to group by layers. To begin, let's press the checkbox next to the All button to turn off all of the lights in our image, so that we can begin to build up our image's lighting from scratch. I'll start by enabling the Rest channel, which contains all the lights that do not fit into the other groups or individual channels, plus the atmospheric effects. As you can see, it contains an atmospheric fog in our scene. Going forward, let's enable a couple of layers of lights, starting with the dome light, which is self-explanatory. Then let's enable the Rhino document sun, and then the city fill lights, which you'll see are helping to brighten up the scene a bit. Finally, I'll enable the self-illumination channel, which gives us all of the neon-looking city lights. Now that we have some light to work with, let's make some tweaks. I'll start by decreasing the multiplier value for the self-illumination to 0.5, and then also bring down the dome light value to 0.65. Decreasing these multiplier values will make the lights look dimmer, whereas increasing the multiplier makes them look brighter. Bringing these down a bit is helping to give the scene a bit more contrast. Next, I'm going to click on the color swatch for the city fill lights and make some changes to the hue. If I give this a darker purplish blue color, you'll see that the lights update in nearly real time, giving us a quick preview as we find a color that suits the image. Alright, that's working for me. Now our image is already looking more interesting with just these few tweaks we've made to create a more dynamic and contrasty look and feel, without any need to re-render the image. Next, let's take a look at how we can do some compositing in the new layer editor to take our post-processing even further. At this point, we can either leave our light mix changes behind and start compositing with the original rendered image, or in this case, we can press the To Composite button here to send our light mix changes to the compositor so we can expand on the tweaks we made already. Now, you'll see that beneath the source composite layer, we have a folder containing all of our light mix changes as render elements, in case we'd like to make any further adjustments to those layers. Let's go ahead and twirl up this folder here and explore how we can do some color corrections on a single render element, as well as our whole image here. The new layer tree-based editing system allows us to do all sorts of nuanced color corrections, as well as set blending modes, and even combine render elements right here in the VFB. The layer system applies corrections from the bottom to the top, meaning layers on top of the stack are considered in the foreground, and the result of all layers below it is considered the background. To do some color corrections, I'm going to right-click on the source composite layer, and in the new layer menu, select Render Element. This will put a render element layer above our Lightmix folder. The layer is set by default to the RGB color render element, but we can switch the element to whatever we want to do color corrections on. I'm going to switch this to the reflection render element. Now, since the element's blend mode is already set to add, you'll see right away that the reflections pop out quite a bit. This is a bit too strong now for my taste, so let's lower the opacity down until we have something that feels more balanced. Great! Next, if we right-click on the reflection layer, we can apply color corrections directly to it. For example, let's add a new curves correction layer. Now, you'll see that a curves layer has appeared above the reflection layer, with a downward pointing arrow next to it. This indicates that the curves are applied only to its parent, the reflection layer, rather than to the entire image. As a result, we can make isolated color corrections to the reflections without affecting any other layers. The curves allow you to remap image colors using a Bezier curve, as well as save and load ACV curve files from Adobe Photoshop. To demonstrate, we can select a point and then click and drag on its handles to affect the shape of the curve. You'll see the image updates as well when we make adjustments, showing us the effect of our changes. Alright, now you've got the fundamental idea of how to do compositing in the VFB and tweak render layers. Of course, you can take these concepts further in your own scenes, for example, by applying some color corrections to the entire image as well. Now, I'd also like to show you how layer tree presets work in VRay 5, which allow you to save and load in changes as presets that you've made using the layer editor. If you'd like to save or load in a preset, first open up the VFB settings and head to the Layers tab. Here we can set the preset's path, which will give us quick access to any layer tree preset files that have been saved at this location. I'll paste a path I've set up in advance and make sure to hit Save and Close. Now, let's head to the Save Layer Tree Preset icon and save our composite corrections. Now, we could reload these same color corrections for any image, so long as it was rendered with the exact same render elements that are saved with the preset. You can also easily save universal presets that exclude any composite or light mix corrections if you only add and/or modify layers above the source layer in the editor. Next, if I click on this icon over here, you'll see that I can get quick access to all of the custom layer tree presets I've placed in that folder location. I've prepared a few presets in advance, which we can preview when I hover my mouse over them. You'll see that each preset here can have a dramatic impact on the mood and appearance of the image, allowing you to get as creative as you want with your renders in post-production. Altogether, using the light mixer and compositor makes it possible to go beyond rendering and get polished, beautiful-looking images, all within the new VRay 5 VFB. And when you're all finished with compositing, just don't forget to save your render out of the VFB by clicking on the Save icon. We've also updated the entire built-in material library so that the new material parameters, such as the coat and sheen, are utilized. The quality of most materials has been increased as well, with high-resolution texture maps having replaced the old 1K texture maps. We've also improved the library download process, and if you have other VRay products also installed on the system, such as VRay 5 for SketchUp or 3ds Max, the asset files will be shared between them so that they are not re-downloaded more than once. In VRay 5, we updated the dirt textures functionality with additional parameters, and it now employs both ambient and inner occlusion modes, so that you can shade open corners instead of crevices with the occluded color. As a result, you can easily create procedural weathered streaks and dirt in crevices to create even more realistic and grimy-looking materials. The VRay generic material now has a built-in bump layer implemented. There's no longer any need to add bump attributes to a material. Simply use the built-in bump parameter section instead. In addition, the new bump offers better shader performance than in previous versions of VRay. We also now support an experimental out-of-core GPU render mode. This means you can render on GPU even if your scene exceeds your GPU VRAM limit. Note that since this is currently an experimental feature, this option is only available for CUDA-enabled GPUs and is not yet supported for RTX. 2D displacement is also now supported on GPU and offers an advantage in that it preserves all of the details in the displacement map, provided that the object has valid UV coordinates. We have also implemented a new displacement object modifier to simplify your workflow. Now you can apply displacement to objects in your scenes using the VRay toolbar button, as well as the new displacement parameters in the VRay Object Properties panel in Rhino. When using the VRay denoiser, you can enable the Affect All Channels option, which now reduces blurriness for objects seen through glass when using denoising. The VRay Ruby API has also been redesigned and extended. It streamlines third-party extensions development and ensures long-term support for scripts using it. Documentation for the new API has been added to the installation folder and can be found in the VRay for Rhino extension menu in the API documentation. Alright, now you've seen how the powerful new features in VRay 5 can take you beyond rendering, speed up your workflow, and get you stunning-looking images more easily than ever. You can now render in real time using VRay Vision for Rhino and Grasshopper, and save images or animations. VRay 5 also makes lighting your scenes easier than ever, with the VRay Light Gen enabling you to generate hundreds of skies and lighting variations with the click of a button. And the new randomization parameters and shading layers can get you even more realistic results with less effort. Finally, the redesigned VRay Frame Buffer boasts a sleek new interface and powerful layer editor to manage your color corrections. And with the new light mix and compositing modes, you can now handle your post-processing needs directly within VRay 5. If you'd like to try out VRay 5 for Rhino, please visit our website, chaosgroup.com, for more information and to download a free trial. If you have any further questions, please feel free to check out our docs page for additional information about these new features as well. For the latest updates, please click subscribe on our YouTube channel, Chaos Group TV, so that you can keep up to date with our latest new products and releases. Thank you for joining me for this webinar session, and I hope to see you next time.